All right, folks. Well, we are back from a really busy week at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and we thought now that we've had a moment to digest everything that we heard, it would be apropos to do a little bit of a news roundup. So I'd like to introduce our editor-in-chief here at RCR Wireless News, Dan Meyer. And Dan, obviously 5G was the dominant theme at Mobile World Congress. Lots of big vendor announcements around carrier trials that are coming up. So what was your take on all this? Do you feel like we're still dealing with 5G as a marketing term, or do you get the impression that with these waves of trials, we're going to see something a little more concrete?
Yeah, I guess, hey, first of all, thanks. Good to join you again. But I think it is definitely migrating towards being more of a real thing. Obviously, I think leading up to the show, I think we were expecting a lot of 5G talk. That's been kind of a lot over the past several months anyway. But still, obviously, when it comes to what actually 5G is, that's still, I think we're years away from what that's going to be. But, I guess this always tends to happen when it comes to new technology. 4G was the same way. it took years and years of people talking about it before we actually got to it. I guess I was a bit surprised by the amount of 5G talk because it did seem like, again, you were there in person. You did tons of stories from the show. It seemed like 5G was part of almost every conversation there. I guess I was a bit surprised by the depth of it, but maybe I shouldn't have been as surprised because, it is one of those things where, 4G is obviously, I think we've kind of run the course there in terms of, at least from a marketing perspective. I guess when it comes to, we got to move to the next one anyway. So it was interesting to see that. I guess, for yourself, you were there on site again. Did it seem like it was as 5G centric as it seemed from afar?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I would say that, and part and parcel of the discussion that was meant to make 5G seem more real was this big emphasis on use cases. So this is where you get into that sort of overlap between 5G and then the Internet of Things applications that it will ultimately enable. So we saw some really cool visualizations of like clouds of drones being deployed for agricultural monitoring and management purposes. And then we saw a lot of emphasis on not just autonomous vehicles, but also remotely operated vehicles, which if you can imagine maybe in a large industrial mining site, you would have, conveyors that are autonomously moving materials. Then you would also have vehicles that are being remotely operated. So there's a huge, loss of liability associated with that. But when we're talking about robots driving themselves and then robots driving other robots using the tactile internet, it becomes a little apparent that we're a few years away from that. But it's a compelling vision. But I guess one of the things I took away is that as we approach that vision, we're going to hit a lot of incremental benchmarks along the way because, I'm sitting here talking to these people thinking, wow, that's great. I'd love to make a VoLTE call on my smartphone if maybe we could do that. So I do think as that technology matures towards 5G, it'll follow the standard, right? So we'll see a lot of these LTE-Advanced Pro standard applications actually come live on commercial networks. So that'll be stuff like carrier aggregation and support for massive MIMO. So it was exciting to see what the future is going to look like. But I think I would have appreciated a little more emphasis on the incremental steps to getting there.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the use cases that they've been talking about and obviously showing there, but those are amazing. Back when 4G was just first being talked about, the use cases then were so much, so quaint, it seems at the time. Now they're looking at such big things now to do, and that's impressive. But I also agree, hey, getting closer to Skynet's always a great thing. But I agree with you when you're saying that I wish we could kind of, instead of making these big leaps, that we could kind of fine tune 4G for now. Because like you said, it's still, we're still not quite there with 4G at this point. Obviously, the marketing aspect of 4G is already out there, but the actual technical requirements of 4G, we still haven't kind of seen that yet in the commercial deployments. And so that's still kind of, I wish we were there because, like you said, the VoLTE call situation, it'd be great if VoLTE calls were consistent, even across the same carrier. It seems like over the past several months, I've got a VoLTE phone myself, and the call quality has just degraded rapidly in VoLTE on the same network. And so even just getting the basics of 4G right would be a great first step, and at least make it seem like, we could take the next step to 5G at some point. But I agree with you. It still seems like we're still so far away from those 5G moments. And, the smart people will get it figured out. But in the near term, I wish we could get the basics correct on 4G before making that big leap to 5G. So we'll see how that plays. But.
Yeah, and now I wanted to discuss with you a little bit sort of the software side of all of this. Obviously, along the way to 5G, we're going to see operators virtualize their networks using NFV and SDN. And this is, I mean, it's something that is a great way to drive efficiency today, but might not necessarily be absolutely imperative to the management of your network. But when we do talk about these 5G use cases, it really does become apparent that the sheer volume of data and the way that it needs to be orchestrated is going to require NFV and SDN. So I was curious, from your perspective, you kind of lead our coverage around this. Did you hear anything out of Mobile World Congress that gave you the impression that we're going to start to see maybe a rapid uptake of virtualization?
I mean, it was definitely good to see a lot of companies talking about their advances when it comes to virtualization. A lot of people working together. I mean, it's very similar to the 5G issue and the fact that we're still working towards standards when it comes to virtualization too. And so to kind of see people cooperating, partnerships on this, there was some good movement there. But a lot of the stuff I've seen and people I talked to during the show and before the show, it still seems like we're so far away from any sort of real commercial broad deployment of virtualization that I think we're still I'm not too up on that being a very near term kind of thing. I think we still got a ways to go with that. To me, it's very similar to 5G. I think we still got so many more years to go to really get virtualization deployed throughout a network to a level that is going to be needed to handle what is being talked about in terms of 5G. To be able to control 5G, I mean, autonomy is going to be a big part of this. We're still seeing so far away from that moment that, again, it's good to talk about it and get it out there because at least we get working on it. But I'm still very, I wouldn't say pessimistic, but I think it's going to be years and years before we actually see some broader deployments of this. I mean, I'm working on a report now looking at the space, and that was one of the things I'm just talking to people about is that we're still so far away from actual broader deployments of this. I mean, it's still such an early, concepts being worked through, but that's still kind of like where we are. I mean, again, it was good to see some agreements at the show, but I think some of the 5G, I think we're still ways away from seeing broader deployments there.
Yeah, my perspective of being over there was you're kind of right on the realities of NFV and SDN, but you hit on something that I thought was a really dominant theme around software, and that was collaboration. This is just to give you an example. During the show, Huawei announced a project called OpenO, where they're working with Linux Foundation, China Mobile, and a number of other partners to really wrap their minds around how would you integrate all of these 5G systems, how would you orchestrate them from the software level. But the point I'm trying to make here is they didn't have any tangible results, but they were emphasizing the fact that the only way they foresee doing this at scale and in a manner that's quick enough to take advantage of a value proposition in the market is to do it together. And that was sort of a theme that kept coming up over and over again. It's borderline philosophical. Like we've reached sort of an inflection point in the industry where the only way to keep going at this pace is to sort of drop with the proprietary walls and then move on forward. One thing I wanted to get your perspective on. So in the future, as products are coming to market that have this basis in collaboration, in open source initiatives, how do you differentiate and make money? If everybody's using sort of the same foundation, what does X company do to use the same information but still make money? How do they differentiate? How do they stay competitive?
Yeah, that's $1 million. That's $1 billion question, the $1 trillion question. That's going to be the key to this, and that's been always kind of the issue around open source. Is if everybody's collaborating and everybody's sitting around the campfire sharing everything, you're right. I mean, these are all businesses at the end of the day, and they're all trying to make money. That's the big challenge, right? And I'm not sure that has still been worked out yet. I think at this point people are talking very collaboratively about this and the need to work on these things together. But I think historically we've seen, at least the telecom space, is that there's always these IP battles that happen, and people always want to get their piece of the pie on this. And while I like to at least see people talk about this stuff, and obviously it would be great for everybody to work together. That's gonna be the trick. And you're right. I mean, the companies that don't have a lot of IP in this, they're going to be difficult to work with, and it's going to be a challenge. So that's gonna be the biggest challenge for all of this. Is going to be getting people on the same page. But then you're right. How do you make money off it? And that's going to be where, it's going to take a lot of big advances from these companies to really try to differentiate themselves in the market when it comes to what they can do differently. Because otherwise, what's the point? I mean, obviously from carriers' perspective, that's what they want. They want to be able to just pick and choose who they want, and make it, really flat rate pricing and everything. But for the vendors out there, for the established vendors like the Ericssons and the Nokias and the Huaweis of the world, they've got a legacy business model that they have to try to protect to an extent. And so it'll be interesting to see how they play that out, because that's going to be a big challenge for all these guys going forward. And there's big companies that don't want to give up their profits. So that's to be seen. That's still going to be a big challenge.
So I guess
I have no answer for you, basically.
If you did, we probably would not be doing this. But,
True.
So yeah, I guess to bring that full circle, my sort of big takeaway from Mobile World Congress is if you look at the vision of 5G and you look at what needs to happen on the software side to bridge that gap to 5G, I feel like we're going to see a really massive sea change in the way that carriers and vendors model their businesses.
Yeah.
When we talk about this volume of data and adding connections to all of these objects, it just is not going to work under the current way that data is priced. Or, I mean, absolutely it'll work, but no one will be able to afford it. So that's what I really gathered out of all of this is the telecom business, it's going to stay lucrative and it's going to stay innovative, but the underlying business models are going to have to really change in the next 5 years. So I kind of look forward to seeing that play out. I sure think that sets the stage to see a lot of differentiation, to see some people really take off and really take advantage of that sort of market gap, while other people might late start, might struggle out of the gate, and that might kind of doom you in the short term. So really a lot of stuff to think about. It was an informative show, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, Dan.
No problem. Good to talk to you.